Hello, everyone. Welcome. Today, we are excited to connect with a very special guest, Mary-Anne, aka the Lady Plumber. Mary-Anne has been a trailblazer in the trades for many years for women, making her mark as a plumber, gas fitter, roofer, and generally all around powerhouse in a very male dominated industry. Her dedication and success have made her a role model for many aspiring women in trades, showing that it's really possible to thrive in fields traditionally dominated by men. For those of you who are coming from Mary-Anne's audience, thank you for being here. My name is Rika. I am the president of Envol, and we are so excited to be here today to have this conversation. Envol is a Vancouver-based people solutions firm that provides tailored HR, recruitment, training, and DEI solutions to our clients across North America. And we came across Mary-Anne's Instagram page and were just immediately inspired, really, by her journey. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are really at the core of everything that we do at Envol. And to see a woman like Mary-Anne excelling in trades, traditionally dominated, male dominated industry is just so amazing to see. We wanted to take this opportunity to amplify her story because it's a really powerful example of just what's possible. Many blue collar businesses that we work with and that we see, they really care about DEI, but really aren't sure where to start, how to make it stick, or really how to make it meaningful. And stories like Mary-Anne's shows really that progress is possible. And even in industries where change can feel really tough, her journey can help others see a path forward and spark that confidence that they can take that next step. And so we're so excited to have this conversation today. And we hope that you find it as inspiring and empowering as we do. Thank you, Mary-Anne, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. And by the way, congratulations for being president because I absolutely love women in these leadership roles. So I absolutely love it. And it's so great to meet you today.
Thank you. So, to get us started, your journey in trades, as I mentioned, is pretty darn amazing. Can you share with us what first drew you to the industry and how you started your career as a plumber?
Yeah, it's a very long story, but I guess I first got into construction. It wasn't an option for women when I first got into the trades because it has now been 21 years as of this month.
Mm.
And it was a lot different back then than it is today. So I was working at a pizza place actually, and there is quite a history before then, but I was supposed to be a doctor. That was what was happening. There was no ifs, ands, or buts. I was going into the medical field. I was a near straight A student, so academics were always very high on my priority list. But I was also very small, very skinny, and I looked different than a lot of the people I went to school with, and I was bullied pretty heavily. So
Mhm.
after years and years and years of bullying, I finally dropped out of school halfway through grade 11 to everybody's shock, including very much my parents and my homeroom teacher, who was devastated. Um, but you just kind of get to a point where enough is enough, and that is kind of what led me onto my path this way. So I have absolutely zero regrets with dropping out of school, and I don't like to advertise it because I think it's very important to get your education. And I did actually get my grade 12 equivalency later on in life, which actually was very early because they almost didn't let me into the adult education because I was too young. But after, fighting my way through it, they finally gave up because I was very persistent and they let me in and I ended up graduating from there. But I, at the time, had finished my school and I was working at this pizza place as a as a manager, and I was making like 11.50 an hour or something like that. And I was doing bar rush shifts, and it was a young person's job for sure. I was 18 at the time, 17, 18. And I was staying with my mom at the time because I just got out of a really bad relationship, and I was waiting for the bus going into town to go to work, and this guy stopped and he asked me for directions. And he's kind of cute. He's driving an Escalade. He's probably a few years older than me, and not that I'm a tire biter, but he was very well put together. And so he asked me for directions, and I'm like, oh yeah, it's just over there, a couple streets down. And then he was gone, and then a few minutes later he drives back. I guess he did what he needed to do. He's coming back, and then he stops and he's like, do you want to ride somewhere? And not the best decision. I made a lot of bad decisions in the past, but this was one that actually kind of worked out, I guess. um and so I took the ride, and he drove me to work, and as we were heading in, we had a conversation. And I asked him what he did, because I was curious. It's like, how is this guy so successful at such a young age? And he said that he owned a construction company. And I was like, wow, that's pretty sweet. I was raised on a hobby farm, and laborious jobs were just came naturally to me. Work ethic was something that was unavoidable. And I was like, yeah, that would be really cool to get a job in construction, because I had absolutely no idea what I was gonna do. I closed a lot of doors when I dropped out of school. And then his response was, well, why can't you? And I was like, hmm. And that just kind of put the bug in my ear. And I continued on with my job for a little while, actually a long while, because it took me a while to get a job. But I, at that point, made a resume, and
Mhm.
I was 18. And I had this very limited resume. I'd been working since I was 13 years old, but no, nothing construction like, and I didn't get a single call back. I think I handed out 100 resumes and didn't
Oh,
get a single call back. And so that was a little disheartening, but I knew this guy who was a friend of mine, and he worked for his uncle here and there, who owned a renovation and roofing company. So I had asked my friend if he would ask his uncle if I could get a job, which he said that he did, but I found out later that he didn't. But I ended up running into his uncle one day. So I asked him, I said, hey, did so and so ask if, I could maybe get a job as a laborer? And he's like, no, he never did. Yeah, cool, thanks, friend. So I asked him if he would hire me, and he's like, yeah, when do you want to start on Monday? And
right.
so yeah, I'm so grateful that he gave me that opportunity, because without him, I probably wouldn't be where I am today. And I
Mhm.
hope that he knows that. I don't know where he is now. But yeah, I'm just very grateful for him taking me on without hesitation either. So I started at 12.50 an hour, and within a month I was making 17, and I was like, "Oh my God, I'm rich." Like before I could barely afford my rent, my phone, and food. Now it's like, wow, I actually have like a case of beer in my fridge.
And back then, 20 years ago, 1750 was a good
It
wage.
was it was a really great wage, for somebody that was pretty much making, I wouldn't say minimum wage. Minimum wage was pretty slim back then, but it was close to. So I was living the high life.
I love that. I love, really the statement of like, why can't you? The why not? I
Hmm.
think, as we think about inspiring young, females or, underrepresented groups in the construction industry, it's the question of why not. We often
Yeah.
question ourselves thinking, we can't do this, or I don't have this skill set, or I
Yeah,
can't.
well, and it wasn't even a thought in my
Yeah.
mind, because it just wasn't proposed as an option ever. It's like you're gonna be a nurse, you're gonna be a lawyer, and an accountant, uh, whatever these other very traditional jobs are. Like, you're very math and science smart. Um,
Hmm.
so this is what you're gonna do. these are your options here. So it just never even occurred to me that I could do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny how just those little decisions in life just change your
Yeah.
whole path so drastically. And for me, it was picking up a ride from some
Yeah.
random guy.
For those of you out there listening, we're not picking up rides from strangers.
No,
We are
don't,
thinking,
don't.
why not?
Yeah.
Why not? Give it a try.
Yeah, there's a lot of decisions that I made in life that I'm just like, well, I don't suggest that you do this, but it actually ended up working out. So, yeah, so I worked for that company for about, I would say, a year or two. And that's where I met my partner, who was the cousin of my friend.
Mm.
And that was a very bad and toxic relationship.
Mm.
So I'll leave that part out for another day, but um, we ended up having a very bad falling out, and we actually opened up a company at that time. So we were subcontracting off this commercial roofing company and Alpha Roofing, and I ended up after the day after our falling out, I went to the boss who I very, very much looked up to. He was if there was a business owner that, was somebody to look up to, it was definitely him. He was very kind, but very firm, a very successful man. And I went to him the next day and asked him for a job, and he put me on a roof with a bunch of guys, and I ended up, yeah, roofing
Haven't looked back.
roofing for a bunch of years after that until I started plumbing, switched
I
over.
love that journey. I love that journey.
So that was kind of my journey, or that was my journey into construction. It's kind of how it all began. So I have a question for you. So,
Okay.
as a company that specializes in HR and recruitment for the blue collar sector, what steps do you think businesses in the trades can take to attract more women into the industry?
Absolutely. Attracting more women in trades, in our opinion, really starts with intentionality and how you position your company's employer brand. Representation, in our opinion, really matters, whether that's through your website, through your social media, through your recruitment campaigns. Really, so the first case is showcasing women who are already thriving in the trades. So, from there, it's really about then creating a welcoming environment because investing indefinitely into marketing resources only to have an inhospitable environment, people are just going to leave. So it really starts with before someone applies for a job and then creating inclusive relationships with them, creating an inclusive environment and a workplace where people feel comfortable going to the washroom or having the right kind of gear to put on. It's those little things, the things that we think that are so small that makes such an incredible difference in whether someone feels welcomed or just a side thought, like a thorn in your side, right? Like you want them to feel like they're welcome. So what we do is we often encourage our clients to look at the full candidate's experience, not just the years or, in your just, I think, Marianne, you really spoke to this. It's not just like what's on paper, it's what can that person bring to the table as holistically. And to look at what are some of the barriers that potentially unintentionally turn women away from applying. That could look like rigid work schedules or a lack of proper facilities on job sites. Flexibility and safety are big ones, as we would for what we would see in making a really inclusive environment for women. It starts with the recruitment campaigns, but it really ultimately lies in who you are and how you treat your team members once they've joined.
That's amazing. Yeah, and it's interesting that you say about, gear and using the washroom. Well, I was never one that cared about whether I had a separate bathroom because I think that, having a clean bathroom should be for both genders or
Mm-hmm.
for anybody, which was not the case on a lot of these job sites. But there was times, and I haven't thought about this since you mentioned that women tend to go to the bathroom more than men. And it was something that I haven't thought about in so long, but I remember there being times that it's like, man, I pee again, and it's to the point that I'm limiting how much coffee I'm drinking and how much water because I don't want to be the one that's going to the bathroom every like, half hour. And because people notice those things, let alone the gear. I didn't have appropriate workwear, like women's workwear. It just plain didn't fit. Like I'm a size 000 pants. I'm tiny. And there was nothing like that when I was, first starting in construction. So the changes that you've seen over time, I can actually wear Carhartts now because they actually fit. Maybe I'm just bigger. I don't know. But it's, I'm not just going to the thrift store to go pick up, some pants to wear at work anymore. I can actually get legitimate workwear, which is, comfortable and more durable and more expensive, but
Yeah, but I mean, it's even
still.
having that option accessible. When
Yeah,
something when we're
exactly.
starting on with our clients, that's one of the first things. It's the easiest thing to make
Mhm.
someone feel welcome. It's you have something for me that's going to fit me instead of
Exactly.
all of this, large, ill-fitting clothing,
Yeah.
which also in some cases can create safety issues. Just
Yeah, totally had harnesses that were one size fits most. That
Mhm.
it does not fit most. Well, maybe it does fit most, but I am not most.
Yeah.
I'm lucky that I didn't fall out of them the couple times that I did fall off the roof. It's interesting that you kind of mentioned that.
And so with, over the years being in such a heavily male-dominated sector, what would you say was the most significant barrier that you faced, and how did you navigate it?
The most significant barrier, it's changed a lot over the years. It really has. From the beginning stages, it was very, very much different than it is now. You really, really had to prove yourself back then. And you really, really had to learn how to keep your mouth shut because you can't be like, I have no problem now with being as vocal as I want on a job site. If somebody is disrespectful, if somebody is being lazy, I have no problem in saying something. But that was not the case back then, whether it came to sexual harassment or hazing or all the things that not just women have to deal with, everybody has to deal with. But if you opened your mouth about anything, like you were blacklisting yourself, and it's like all of a sudden these people just getting laid off or just be gone after an incident like that. You would just turn a blind eye to a lot of things, and it's unfortunate that it was like that, but that's just the way that it was. I mean, I'm haven't worked for a company in so long, and the companies that I did work with, I was working with amazing, amazing people. For the most part, there was always the one-offs that didn't get along with, but for the most part, everybody that I worked for were like brothers to me. They were like family, and I'm very grateful that I got to work for companies like that because it's not always the case for people. And I see it all the time, especially on my social media DMs. I hear about it a lot, and it's sad. But, I would say that those were the biggest barriers is just learning how to keep your mouth shut and not get laid off or fired, for reasons that are really, I mean, I wouldn't say they're out of your control because you can't control the situations by keeping your mouth shut. But now, I guess the big turning point was when I started my company. There was a very large situation that I didn't really know how to get around, and is my company going to be successful with people knowing that it's owned by a female? And this was a very, very big deal, and it was a very, very big decision whether to promote my company as a woman-owned and operated plumbing and gas company, or do you hide it and hope that people are going to call you and surprised that it's owned by a female but you do good work, then it'll all work out. I did not know which way it was going to go, so I decided to hide it, and I went with a very corporate sounding name, so I ended up naming my company Westcom Plumbing and Gas. And there's nothing feminine about it. To me, it sounds very corporate. That's just what I decided to do. I didn't even put my name on my business card for 2 years because I just was really afraid that people wouldn't hire me because I was female. And I know that it happens. It
Yeah.
probably still happens, but I was very much wrong. I am from a small town where everybody, for the most part, knows each other, especially if you're from there. My company just took off. Been no downtime since I opened, and people have asked me, it's like, oh, why didn't you, name your something a little bit more you? It's like it was a fear. It was just fear. And that had evolved into further barriers. Like that part came and went, and then I found out that people that do hire me generally because they either know that I do good work, don't charge an arm and a leg. I'm very much kind of in the middle of the road. And quality is like of my utmost importance. And then you have that female attention to detail. As time went on, I started hiring employees. Well, you don't really get, I don't know if this is the case for you. Maybe it's a different industry, you get different people, but for me, the only men that ever sent me resumes were ones that wanted just to get their foot in the door. So they had absolutely no experience. I've never had a resume from a journeyman ticketed plumber, ever. Never.
Mm.
It's all been women because they see me as an entryway into construction, which is fantastic. And I love giving people, like everyone that I've received a resume from, I've ended up hiring because I want them to have that opportunity, even if we don't end up having this long-term relationship together. I want them to get that foot in the door because it's so much easier when you can put something on your resume. But because of that, I kind of pigeonholed myself because now I had all these women working for me and now I was known as a woman-only company, which was very much not the case. But plumbers here, we already have such a small pool of labor. And now you're taking that and bringing it to like this because it's like what 2 or 4. I don't think it's 4% for plumbing. I think it's like 1 or 2% for plumbing, if that, for female plumbers. So now I've made that labor pool of mine go from this to like
Mhm.
this. The only way that I could grow my company has now to this huge roadblock, and I wasn't able to ever grow it. So I had this big dream of having multiple vans and self-run company, and that very much was a rude awakening for me that it's like that. I'm sorry, girl, but that ain't happening. And, I don't like to say that I can't, but there are some things that are out of your control, and this was very much one of them.
That's really fair. I'd
Hmm.
love to understand, coming back to where we started with the original challenge of, having to keep your mouth shut, to now where we're talking about you leaning in and your brand is the Lady Plumber. I'd love to hear how you built your voice and the strength to lean into yourself and leaning into strength that comes from how you respond to critics and the strength that you have in the work that you do and the voice that you now have compared to the voice you had then.
Yeah, I mean, I think that not caring about the bullying on social media, it really does not bother me. I know that people want it to bother me, but it just does not bother me at all. And I think that that came with just years of being in construction, to be honest, because it was a lot different back then. Like you had to have thick skin in order to work your way through the days. It didn't matter if they were friends or not on your crew that you were working with. I mean, it wasn't always those people because you worked on these big job sites and there was tons of people and so you had to deal with it from every angle. But I think that it just kind of came over time because, I don't think that well, I mean, I dropped out of school because of bullying, so it must have affected me very much so. And I'm sure that that kind of helped well with how I deal with it now. The fact that I just don't care. I really don't care. Over time and, 21 years in construction, dealt with it for years and years and years. And I think that you just become jaded or you just, it just kind of runs off you. So, but I know that it's not the case for everybody. So it's something that if you are on social media and you are looking to grow your presence, then it's something that you really have to keep in mind that it's not if it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
And it's gonna happen very quickly. And
Mm.
as your grows, like I don't know, 320,000 followers now. It is very much like daily dozens, sometimes hundreds of bad comments, and you just gotta let it roll off of you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What I heard from that is really over time, you built more grit, you know,
Hmm.
dealt
Yeah,
with it for
exactly.
a long time in, working on site, having experienced it as a youth, you found a different way to process it. And now, you're letting your success speak for itself and letting the naysayers live their lives.
Exactly. With diversity, equity, and inclusion being core values at your company, how do you ensure that these values are implemented in your recruitment processes, particularly for women entering traditionally male-dominated trades?
So at Envol, we really don't view DEI as a nice to have, nor do we view it as its own standalone item. We really believe that it needs to be embedded into the DNA of the business. It's really starting at a strategic level. So if inclusion is not a priority in your overall business strategy, it's really hard for it to show up in anywhere else, especially in your hiring practices. That's why we intentionally weave diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, into every step of recruitment when working with our clients. And so whether that's from writing inclusive job postings to, ensuring we're reducing bias in the interview process, to being really thoughtful about where and how roles and jobs are promoted so that we can have a much more higher reach, and more importantly, a more diverse audience. Um, but it doesn't really stop there. We really work with our clients to help build that internal readiness. So again, going back to making sure that the environment women are walking into, or people of underrepresented groups that they're walking into, are safe, that they feel supportive, and ultimately that they're set up for success. So really, our goal is to create a recruitment process that is genuinely inclusive, where people feel seen, where they feel valued, and they're excited to apply. And so we look at it not as DEI, this separate bucket. We look at it as, what is our business strategy? How do we intend to achieve this? And then how can we identify the most qualified, diverse, broad range of people to achieve that goal? And then it just really naturally becomes a part of how you hire, how you onboard, and how you grow your team.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say I see a lot of companies that are very inclusive and, do their part to address all these things, but there's a lot that sure don't, and it's crazy the statistics of crime. It's like 36%, I think was the number of people that have felt either racism or sexism or, prejudice of some degree from all the different diversities of life, and it's shocking that that number is so high in this day and age, it's crazy.
It's a high number. And, you're right. There are a lot of organizations who don't have a strategy around this. And, we're a huge proponent of, like I said, DEI being embedded into a strategy, because it's so difficult to, like, we have so many, as a, you're a business owner, and like, you're wearing so many hats. There's so many things that need to be achieved. To add this bucket item to say I need to have diversity, like, what does that mean? It becomes really hard. But instead, you're if saying, I'm going to run some leadership training for my team, and instead of saying we're going to do an introduction to DEI, which feels like nobody wants to go to that, to say, okay, we're going to run some safety training for our team, and we're going to embed DEI practices into that training.
I'm like, oh great, we're catering to the women now, again.
Exactly. It's more
Yeah,
about, okay, we are going to facilitate this training. And when we're talking about leadership in safety, what are some of the considerations? Like having harnesses that fit everyone,
yeah,
that kind of a thing, right? So the more we can not make it this standalone bucket item that we are making people do, the faster it actually just becomes in everything that we do. And it's just a part of what we're doing. We're already recruiting. How about we make some that our interview questions are not exclusive? We're
Yeah.
already putting out job ads. Why not increase our reach? The reality is for all kinds of organizations is that it's tight hiring market. So to your point, finding people who have skilled trades, who are able, willing, wanting to work, be consistent, be there, that pool is already small. So by doing this diversity, equity, inclusion initiative, quote unquote, you're actually serving your business interests because you're increasing the pipeline and the pool of qualified people to help you achieve that end. So
Yeah.
it's that like shift in mindset around what diversity and equity inclusion actually does for your business, as opposed to this thing I have to do off the side of my desk.
Yeah. And I think that that is a very substantial, issue that's out there. I feel like it's people are feeling more obligated about it right
Yeah.
now than actually, wanting to put it forward and wanting to implement these ways. Yeah.
Great. And we're seeing, especially with what's happening, in the US and a lot of some of different organizations pulling back from diversity, equity, inclusion. It's really easy for them to do so because they are this separate entity.
Yeah.
And if it were embedded in just day-to-day practice, it would be a much more difficult thing to do and be a much more long-term stable part of what business looks like, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
definitely.
Have you seen that conversation around DEI evolve in trade since you first started? Are you noticing start some slight changes in light of what's happening south of the border, or what do you think companies really should do to promote continued DEI values?
Well, I think you kind of nailed it on the head with getting DEI into these programs without actually making it look like it's specifically for having these safety programs, because those are a must have for any legit company out there. Like, you have to have some sort of safety training, safety protocol. So having that training with it built into it, I think is a really, really great idea, because from what I've seen, I haven't really seen it put like that, but it's a way gentler. It's a much gentler way of introducing it, and it's a lot less daunting. I think that this goes for, as a woman, like, it's like, oh, we have to do this training that's specifically just for me being on site, and it doesn't make me feel very good about it that way, because I feel like it's like, oh, now all these guys have to do this training just so I can be working beside them, you
Mm.
know? So I think that that is a fantastic, fantastic way of implementing it into programs and companies. As for have I seen it change since the whole south of the border deal? I don't know. I think it's like so fresh still that, and I honestly haven't really been following that much because it kind of freaks me out, the whole thing. But over the years, I've definitely seen differences and changes happen. I mean, there was nothing like that, like I mentioned before, there was nothing like that before. And then as time went on and women became more vocal, which is great, but at the same time you see it from the other end, it's like men are being like, oh, they're just wanting these changes, like they want that separate bathroom. Why don't we get a separate bathroom? Why don't we get access to a clean bathroom? And then they do. And it's this thing, like, my husband is in construction. He's been in the trades for almost 35 years, and I hear it from his end, and I can totally 100% understand. It's like, why do we get this second bathroom that has a lock on it? We are the only ones with a key when they have to use a bathroom that's overflowing, like, this doesn't make sense to me. But it's one of those things that has progressed over time. And in the early stages, it was very much frowned upon,
Mm.
because it's like, well, why are we making all these changes? It's like you want equality, but you don't want equality in some areas, so it's a bit of a touchy subject. So to balance it out a little bit more and seeing those changes where it's softened a bit, made a little bit more balanced, and I don't want to say hidden, but sort of hidden,
I
uh
would say it's like it's hidden. It's like it's just becomes what it is.
yeah, exactly.
right? And
Yeah.
it just becomes a little bit of a more accepted practice
Yeah.
because it's just part of what we now do instead
Hmm.
of calling it out, so to
Yeah.
say.
Exactly. And I think that's a great way to do it because yeah, when you're completely separating, it's like I feel like when you have these programs that are very inclusive and trying to make companies more diverse and inclusive, it almost feels like it's separating them more, you know? So having a way to implement these systems that feels more natural and is actually more inclusive, I think
Mhm.
it's a really great way to introduce it rather than it just being so harsh to the male genders. Given the changing interest around DEI, what advice would you offer companies in sectors like plumbing and construction that remain committed to doing the work and making meaningful progress?
The first thing that I'd say is start. Start small, start whatever, but start and start now. It's really easy to get overwhelmed or think that you need to do this like massive overhaul over everything, but progress is certainly better than perfection. And I think we always get like really bogged down in that mindset that I have to do everything perfectly. I need to this big, robust program and I can't start now because it's too expensive to do this big thing. But there are a lot of different and small changes that can be made incrementally over time. So the easiest way to do it is really to start by listening, talking to your team, learn what's working for them, where are there some gaps, and then identify, one or two key areas you want to improve on in this quarter or this year, whatever that looks like and whatever is practical to you. And, that could look like updating your hiring processes. It could look like investing in proper facilities. It could look like, launching just a DEI working group. It doesn't have to be a mass overall that happens right now, everything all at the same time. It doesn't have to be about being flashy. It doesn't have to, what we've seen so often is these performative DEI, mandates or actions that or statements that are just so grandiose. And then what happens in the background is really nothing. And that's not what we really want to see. We want to see that like simple, steady, meaningful progress because that's the stuff that sticks
Mhm.
ultimately. My opinion is really like the key to that strategy is to figure out what's going to actually work for your business and for
Yeah.
your culture. It's not going to be a one size fits all solution. Um, I don't really, I'm not a huge fan of these, mass marketed DEI kits and whatnot. Every industry, every business, they have their own unique challenges. They have their own unique barriers to access and success. So we really have to look at it. What's it look like for you? And what does your business want to achieve? And again, how can removing certain barriers or how can increasing the environment that you're working in impact your business? Because, if we're hiring women or we're hiring people of underrepresented groups and they're turning over, that doesn't help your business, right? That costs you, you get frustrated, all the things. So we really want to focus on, thinking about our business and how these actions actually are going to create a different culture or a more representative culture so that people will stay. It's about that
Yeah.
retention component of your business. And that's what ultimately we really want to see. And so, yeah, I would say just start. That's the biggest thing. Start.
Yeah, I feel like I kind of related that to I don't know if you're aware, but I'm very much into like fitness and health and that whole industry. And I feel like it's very similar to people making changes with their health, you know? It's like if you go all in and make these crazy drastic changes right off the hop, it's like you're just setting yourself up for failure. Not in all cases, but really it's like there's so many people that don't succeed because it's like so much all at once that, you just end up throwing your head. And then I've been there. I've been there totally. So I feel like it's very similar and I could totally see that as well. It's like just start small and creep your way up and yeah,
You just
I
build
love
the
it.
practice, build, and like literally the language that we use is like we build that muscle. It's a
Yeah.
new muscle that you're building, and we need to exercise it.
Yeah.
And so it's so funny that you
That's very
named it.
interesting.
Yeah. Like we use that tech terminology all of the time with our clients is and it's okay to make a mistake and it's okay to fall back. It's about starting again and because it's a new learned skill. And like anything else that you're learning, nobody gets it perfect the first
Yeah.
time. 0% of people will. And so
Yeah.
to have that expectation of yourself and to stop doing things because you hit a little glitch, like that's not going to help. That mindset of perfection or nothing
Yeah.
is really not what is going to move the needle. Recognizing we're all fallible, we're all going to make a little bit of a mistake. Just keep moving and keep that progress growing. You're learning, you're building that muscle, you're going to flex it eventually. But for now, we're just building it. You've had such a successful career. It's really obvious. How do you think, or did mentorship and support from other women in the industry, how has it played a role in your journey? And do you mentor others in trades today?
So I had zero mentors because there wasn't anybody that looked like me in the industry that I knew of anyways. And, it wasn't as easily accessible. Smartphones weren't around when I first got into construction. I don't even think I had a computer. And if I did, it only worked half the time. So it was, I didn't have anybody that looked like me, had the same problems as me, and to ask questions to and to look up to, and so I just kind of figured it out as I went along, which is why now I do really try and go out of my way to mentor women, and whether it just is helping them out in, my DMs on social media, because I get a lot, I get a lot of messages, and I don't respond to all my messages because there's a lot, every day. But I do make sure I go through them, and if I see one that's jumping out where it's a young woman or anybody that's, struggling with their job, then I really try and go out of my way. Well, I do go out of my way with every single one of them to make sure that I do try and shed some light on their situation or help them out in some way, because it doesn't have to be, part of my French, but it doesn't have to be shitty, you can have a great successful career in the industry without bullying and hazing, and you can work in an environment that shows you respect and amazing people. You just have to find that spot. I have recently got a message from this young lady, and she's, a first year apprentice. She was really struggling. She worked in a very, very toxic environment. And some of the stories she was telling me, and she was not learning anything. She literally like pushed a broom all day. And that was what she did. You're not going to learn anything by doing that. And it was just really sad to hear what she was going through and the struggles, and her boss was just so cruel, and her coworkers were not accepting of her being there. And it was just sad to hear, to the point that she was going to quit, like quit plumbing, period. Like she was gonna go do something else. And I was like, hey, just pump the brakes for a minute, because we need more women in plumbing for sure. Let's not jump the gun on anything here. Why don't we try this? And then so I said, don't quit your job quite yet. Just keep it. But in the meantime, why don't you look for another one? Because not every company is going to be like this. This is not how it's supposed to be, and it never was for me, and it shouldn't be for you. Are there companies out there like that? Absolutely there are. But they're not all like that. So why don't you make up your resume and start going to other companies and looking for a new job? So that's what she did. And it was like a week or two later that she ended up telling me that she was quit her job, and she was now working with an amazing company who treated her with respect, and she got to learn new things. She learned more in like the, couple of weeks that she did in the entire time that she worked at this other company. So yeah, it warms my heart that I can make some sort of a difference for somebody. And I get these messages all the time, and I really hope that I do help them out in some way or another. And this is just one that kind of stood out that was very recent. So I'm glad that now she's working for a much better company, and I wish her all the best in her career in the plumbing industry.
So excited to hear about the transition and her success and I think that just speaks to, again, the importance of the environment for
Mm.
keeping women or people who are in underrepresented groups in trades, you know,
Yeah, totally.
and the more realistically, like the organizations that have that type of environment, of a positive environment, they're going to have the top people in their team.
Yeah,
And that ultimately is going to create a competitive advantage for them, inevitably,
yeah,
right? And so I think over time, it's really going to be a matter of seeing how the other companies need to learn that they eventually need to step up. Because when
yeah.
people are leaving them constantly, when they're in that constant churn of staff, their customers, our orders aren't getting filled because they can't, and their walls getting full of all like their stack of orders, nothing's moving because they don't have anybody on staff because they
Hmm.
can't keep them. Like those customers are going to go elsewhere. Like
Yeah,
it is actually what you've just described as the pure example of a business case for why
yeah,
that matters.
yeah.
And I'm so happy that she found a place that
Me
appreciated her
too.
talents.
Me too. I'm
Mm.
so, so happy for her. So it's fantastic. And you know, like I don't know if you've seen the American Plumber Stories episode that I was on just recently came out, but my boss that I worked for pretty much my entire plumbing career, minus the very beginning, he was interviewed, and I wasn't sure if he was gonna go ahead with it or not, but I asked him if he wanted to be on, and he very much said that he would. And it was nice to hear him say some things, because it he said that, I was his first female employee, and
Mm.
he's hired and uh, put, I think, three or four more to getting their license after me, which is incredible. And, he said like people worked harder when I was around. I don't know if it was because, you set the pace,
Mhm.
or is it because there's that level of competitiveness? Because you don't want to get shown up by the colonel on site. So,
We call it make Columbia situation.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And also things that should be considered, that people are going to work harder when you have somebody that you have a little bit of competitiveness with. And mind you, I'm pretty competitive, so I try to do
Competition
the best
drives
of
whether it's
everything.
gender related or not. Like just
Exactly.
that
Yeah.
competitive spirit. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was cool to hear that, but it's just definitely something to consider as well if you're looking at hiring, a female, that it just might make your entire crew work a little bit harder and things get done a lot faster.
Love that.
So, what role do you think mentorship plays in encouraging more women to pursue careers in the trades? And how does your company support mentorship opportunities within these industries?
For sure, for sure. So I would say, like we talked about, mentorship is huge. For women entering in trades, it can really be the difference between sticking with it and walking away. Your
As
example,
we've seen, yeah.
like literally key to that. So knowing when someone's either got your back or can give you tips and tricks or like just simply understands the challenges that they're facing, like they just get it. That is just so incredibly powerful and meaningful in allowing someone to stay. It's tough sometimes, as we just heard. And that's why we really work with our clients to build out some of their internal mentorship frameworks, helping to connect new hires with more seasoned team members in a really more meaningful way. And we've worked with varying organizations in creating women leadership programs where the people who are creating the programs are women in trades in that kind of environment. And that just simply matters for the same purpose of when you said earlier on around the why not. When people, because it wasn't even a thought or an option in your mind, seeing is believing it can be, right? If you don't see it, it's so hard to imagine. And so that mentorship, that visibility, that representation, the ability to go to someone who's experienced similar things, who can give you advice that's practical, similar to your story, had you only worked in an environment which was negative, you would have never had the experience to share, hey, you don't have to quit. You don't have to leave this profession indefinitely. You just need to
Mhm.
find the right place to work.
Exactly.
Someone, like just those simple things to learn from lessons from people who have lived experiences, uh, can be the make or break for this type of change within an industry. So when mentorship is intentional, when it creates a space for real dialogue, for real conversation, for growth, like all of those things, it can really make a lasting change for both the mentor and the mentee because they are able to, learn from one another.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. I love it.
We often hear from women who feel hesitant to enter into a traditionally male-dominated industry. What advice would you give to women looking to break into trades?
That's a great question. Yeah, because there's just so much information that I got stored up there. Um, I would say, yeah, that's like it can be really long-winded. Though things are different these days. I find much easier to get a job in construction than it was all those years ago. I think that making yourself stand out in a positive way is definitely, I would say that you're the number one thing that you can do as that first impression. Your
Yeah.
speed is going to be of huge importance, your worth ethic, your attention, paying attention and taking all the information because there's going to be a lot, especially in the beginning, especially if you don't have any experience in the field, there's going to be a lot of information and just paying attention to it. Like for me, what I did because I don't have a great attention span, I made a cheat sheet for information, like with roofing, it wasn't as bad because there was a lot of variety in what I was doing. So, it was pretty easy to learn, especially
Mhm.
when you're hands-on. But plumbing, then there's like so much information on heights and specs and dimensions and all these things that are very much the same for me, residential, for every house that I was working in. So having a cheat sheet was very, very handy. And I really wish that more people would do it because you don't have to ask that same question because it can be frustrating sometimes. It's like, I've told you this like at least a dozen times, It's like, so it can be frustrating coming from a boss as well. It's like you're not retaining that information and it shows, and you kind of notice these things. So noticed for the positive things rather than being noticed for the negative things because we all have negative things. Let's just put that out there right now. We are
Mhm.
not perfect. Nobody is. It doesn't matter what gender you are. Nobody is going to be that perfect employee, but making yourself stand out in areas where you can, if you're being asked to go grab something from the work truck or the work van or a shop or something, don't dilly-dally,
Yeah.
just go. For me, I was running and getting stuff because you are now tripling that time, like, like cutting it into a third because you're moving so much quicker than just walking there. And it makes a difference in how much production you can do in a day. And it makes a difference on whether people are going to notice that or not. It's like, wow, she doesn't just walk, especially if you're on a commercial site or something. It's like, okay, now you got to go down 8 flights of stairs in order to go get something from the work truck. It's like, you better hustle, because otherwise you're going to be gone for like half an hour plus. So, just making yourself noticed in those positive ways is really, really important, I think. And that goes for anybody.
I was just gonna
Just,
say that
yeah,
that
yeah,
that's probably some pretty solid advice for literally anyone getting into a trade. Because
yeah.
it's
And it
really, or any job hustle, like every
totally,
employer is looking for that kind of hustle.
yeah, because everybody would always, I wouldn't joke about it actually. I would, it was just fact that every day is a test,
Yeah.
because you're constantly being tested by your superiors. It
Mhm.
doesn't matter what industry you're in. At least I think, because that's what
Well,
I would do, you know?
in
It's
some
like,
ways, like, there's I don't know if test is the accurate word, but performance is monitored regardless,
yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So
Yeah, absolutely.
when you
So
excel, you will excel in your career, and that's just
exactly. Yeah. So
awesome.
just, yeah, working hard is just, and staying focused and, staying off your phone during the day is helpful too.
What do you think is the most common misconception people have about women working in trades, and how do you challenge those perceptions in your everyday work?
I think that one of the biggest ones is the ability to do hard work.
Yeah.
And that's from what I've seen because we are built differently. You know, we are not always as strong as our male counterparts, but at the same time, I have seemed to do just fine, and you know, I barely break 100 pounds. So it's a very large misconception that women are unable to do the job because of our physical capabilities, and that is just plain incorrect. You know, it, can we lift 500 pounds up off the ground? No, but guess what? Neither can the guys, or at least most of them. There's a select few that can, but it is a very, very small amount. You know, like I can actually lift more than a majority of the men that I've worked with. Yes, I do go to the gym, but I didn't always, you know, and I could still outwork a large majority of them. And it wasn't hard either. So I think that just breaking that misconception, the only issue is I just don't know how you would without actually putting yourself in that position to be seen that you can do the work. Because no, it is doing a job in construction is not easy work. I think that that has been something like from what I've seen hiring women, some of them thought it was going to be easier than it was. And it's just like, no, it's not easy. You have to lift heavy things and you do have to sweat and you will bleed. You're gonna want to throw in the towel some days. Jackhammering was one of them that not just females. Let's just get that straight right now. I have seen grown men cry because they did not want to dig any more trenches.
Yeah.
Literally, grown men cry. And it's like, well, this is what we do. It's not an easy job, and it doesn't matter what gender you are.
Mhm.
You are going to have to work hard. Really, the more women that get into the industry and show that we can do the job, I think that that is going to be the way to really break that misconception. You know, I think that it's just going to have to come with time, really, time and just showing. Like my boss, he ended up he didn't even want to hire me. The reason why he did was because his wife told him to give me a chance. And like I was just laid off by another company because it was during the recession, and I was so upset because I didn't know if I was going to be able to get another job in plumbing. I knew that I could go back roofing, but I didn't want to go back roofing. I started this new career. Just so happened that a friend of mine who owned a siding company knew my boss and suggested that he hired me. And the way he said it was, if you don't hire her, I will, but she wants to do plumbing. So if you could, that would be great. So, but he was very, very hesitant and he brought the conversation home with him, and his wife ended up convincing him to hire me. And then after that, he hired three more, which
Mhm.
I think he's hired way more than three more. I think three or four have continued with him to get their ticket, you know, worked with him all the way through. I think that he's actually hired like much more than that since
Mhm.
for him.
Well, it sounds like part of it was having an ally to advocate for you.
Absolutely.
I think
Yeah.
that's part of it as well as,
Yeah.
aligning us with allies who can speak with us
Yeah.
and advocate for us to get into those roles more prominently.
Yeah. I agree.
What impact do you hope your journey and your advocacy will have on the next generation of women that are going to enter trades?
Well, the whole reason why I started my social media page was to help and motivate and inspire other, you know, not just women, but just people in general. But obviously, I'm kind of biased to women. So I was very reluctant, though, I really had any form of social media, but one of my women in business friends kind of forced me into it, I should say. She like literally forced me into it.
Aren't you glad you
And
did?
yeah, and then so I decided to open my account, and I actually did at her house while she was forcing me. And I'm just so glad that I did because I know that I have helped a bunch of women, and I don't know to what scale or what degree, but I know that even if there was just one, which I think there has been. It makes it all worthwhile because really it's another job, you know. It is very much another job, but it's so rewarding, and I know that I have made an impact, and I just hope that I continue to, especially as I grow older and wiser, and I get to, yeah, hopefully help out as many young women as possible.
Well, I think from our perspective, you're doing an amazing job.
Thank
And
you. And I
yes,
appreciate what you guys are doing. Yeah, it's so important. It's so important.
thank you. Thank you. And, you know, we've seen, and I was looking through, as I mentioned, I was looking through your chats and I saw, all of the women that you commented on. Even there was a woman who's like, I'm 28. Is it too late? And you're like, no, start now.
It's not.
It's not too late.
It's not too late. I had my first employee she was 50.
It's never too late.
It's never too late. And she grew a lot of skills. I mean, it's it's something that you'll never have it taken away from you.
Yes.
The skills that you learn, and especially if you get your ticket, it's something that nobody is ever going to take that away from me. And you will have it for the rest of your life from that point forward. And if you just doing it for just whatever, and see where it takes you, and nobody will ever be able to take those skills. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter what happens, you'll always have them.
Love that. Well, Mary-Anne, thank you so much for joining us today. The Lady Plumber is an incredible platform doing such
Thank
wonderful work, and we are so grateful for you to join us today.
Thank you. I really appreciate having me today. I am honored.